Revolutionary greetings, comrades. As we promised that we will run a number of videos to discuss the program of the Zimbabwe Communist Party. Our program is titled Completing the Liberation of Zimbabwe, Power to the Workers and Peasants. This program was adopted on the 19th to the 21st of December 2019 at the Congress, First Congress of the Zimbabwe Communist Party. In this first video, we are going to deal with the introduction. We outlined in the previous video that we will be discussing different subjects which are contained in the program of the Zimbabwe Communist Party. This, of course, is meant to benefit the members of the Zimbabwe Communist Party, workers in Zimbabwe, peasants, those that will have access to view this YouTube channel. It is going also to assist our comrades in their cell study groups and as they go through our party program. And we are saying, which is a common cause, that it was generally believed that when the Union Jack was lowered in Zimbabwe, raising the Zimbabwean flag, that was on the 18th of April 1980, that the liberation of Zimbabwe was over. And it was generally believed that Zimbabwe will no longer be ruled by white settlers nor by their kith and kin in Britain. If you look into the Zimbabwean flag, you will see that the white star representing socialism was there. It was therefore, because of that, it was also believed that there would be social ownership of the means of production, and that Zimbabwe will be owned collectively by its own people, and soon everyone will have a nice house, access to electricity, access to running water, that no one will go to bed on an empty stomach. It was generally believed that we're going to have jobs, people paid enough to support their families, something which we are not seeing today. We spoke about the strike by workers in the teaching profession. We also have a strike by workers in the security sector. So without doubt, we recognize in this program that the People's War conducted by the soldiers of ZIPRA, the armed wing of ZAPU, and ZANLA, the armed wing of ZANU, was supported by the majority of Zimbabweans. I remember I used to go to the hills to give the guerrillas food. I was a toddler, so I used to accompany either my uncle or my late grandmother to deliver food, because we felt that it was our revolutionary duty to do such. Conditions in 1980, which we must note, were not conducive for the immediate building of socialism. There are those, of course, who do not understand the socialist economy, who believe that from 1980 to somewhere around 1990, Zimbabwe was a socialist economy, which is not true. So the conditions were not favorable for the building of a socialist economy, just as they are not favorable today for a building of a socialist economy. But conditions were conducive for the building of a national democratic economy, something which we are even arguing in this program and today, that one of the things that we need to do if we are to rebuild the Zimbabwean economy is that first and foremost we must build the national democratic economy, and we will define what we mean by building the national democratic economy. We'll explain in the program as we go, but we need to investigate on what actually happened in 1980, thereafter, what went wrong. But the first mistake which happened in 1980 and thereafter was that there was a mistake or a belief that the interest of white settlers and the British ruling class were the same, simply because they were white. It was wrong. We will demonstrate as we go. And secondly, it was wrong to believe that the interest of the leadership or political leadership of the liberation movement, what you call the political leadership, and the majority of the black Zimbabweans was the same, simply because we are all black. That is not the case, and it was not the case. This is why today we are in a crisis. We have the looting class in charge of the Zimbabwean state. Let's look into the white settlers and big capital closely and try to understand the relationship, the big capital in Britain, Europe, and the United States. We acknowledge in this program that white settlers brought with them European technology and the methods of administration and built infrastructure. Through the exploitation of the labor provided by the local black community, which they defeated, they were able to enjoy a living standard higher than most had enjoyed in their country of birth. When white settlers came, many of them in the land which we call Zimbabwe today, some of them in Britain, they could not afford to have a domestic worker, but when they got there, they had this in abundance. They could afford domestic workers and so forth. They wanted and they thought that they were going to make Rhodesia into a British dominion like Canada, Australia, or New Zealand. But of course, in our case, we outnumbered them, because as black people, we are the majority, or we're the majority. The British ruling class were aware of that, aware that the settlers might not, in the long term, be able to retain power. So they had to hatch a plan. As early as 1949, one of its most far-sighted members, David Sterling, established the Capricorn Africa Society. The Capricorn Society, excuse me. The Capricorn African Society, which we spoke about in a previous video when we were discussing the 1963 split, mobilized young, intelligent Africans. Then some of them were used to split the liberation struggle. So they understood that at some point the settlers, white settlers, were not going to be in charge of government. Therefore, they wanted to prepare young people that they were going to be in charge of government, so that they would then represent their interests. We have discussed neo-colonialism. So the Capricorn African Society was basically about that. Let's briefly, before we draw to a conclusion, look into the history of Zimbabwe, because for us as communists, we cannot just look into the future and say this is the state of the Zimbabwean economy today, therefore this is what we need to do. We need to look into our past to say what happened, so that we can together move forward. We all know that our political economy begins in 1890 with the arrival of the pioneer column, when it hoisted its flag on a hilltop in what is called the Harare today. We know historically that Zimbabwe used to trade with Arabs, with the Swahilis, with the Portuguese, Indians, and the Chinese in gold, ivory. But in the main, of course, there was peasant production of grain in the form of different varieties of sorghum, millet. There was growing of vegetables, and of course, you know, we like meat. There was rearing of livestock, goats, cattle, and so forth. The degree of importance of livestock rearing in relation to crop growing varied according to the amount of rainfall and the soil of conditions found in different parts of the country. What is also important that we are mentioning here is that the colonizers simultaneously brought with them both modern infrastructural development and racial oppression. They determined the shape of the country. We, the inhabitants of that land, we never did. They named the country. At the time, we never did. It was known as British South Africa, and then from 1895, it was then known as Rhodesia. So we also note that when the European settlers came to Zimbabwe, they did not go there to just to oppress black people. They went there to establish a home. We did indicate when we were discussing the role of France in West and Central Africa, that the difference with France and Britain is that in the rest of Africa, in West, Central Africa, they were simply there to loot minerals and resources, other resources. But in our case, in Southern Africa, particularly in South Africa and in Zimbabwe, they were there simple. They wanted to create a home. This is what we spoke about when we said the South African Communist Party then characterized this as colonialism of a special type. We, of course, in the program deal with the partitioning of Africa, the Berlin Conference that happened, that partitioned Africa. So when the settlers arrived, they found that we had our own system of governance that was in place, because the next stage of human development when they came was capitalism. We were under a feudal system, or feudal system of a governance. So the development of colonialism came with its twin brother, capitalism. So we moved from a feudal society to a capitalist society. It was then, as capitalism was developing, that land which was under the leadership, or was under the authority of the traditional leader, what we today call the traditional leadership, was then taken and placed in the hands of the new settlers, who determined where blacks should live in squalid conditions, where they pushed us. But of course, from 1890 to 1923, Southern Rhodesia was ruled by the British South African Company. There was elections, which then determined what is called a responsible government. And then the rule of the British South African Company in 1923 came to an end. So with the development of capitalism, when reserves, what we call reserves or rural communities, were created, which were used as a breeding ground for the next workforce, where black people, mainly men, were taken to work in industries, to work in factories, to work in farms and the mines. So the rural communities became a breeding ground for the next labor force. That also brought into it the workers beginning to organize themselves. So in the next video, we will then continue to look therefore how workers then responded when industries were being built, when workers were now beginning to mobilize themselves. What was their attitude? How did the working class begin, or the workers begin to mobilize themselves? Because we have always said that capitalism today, or a bourgeoisie today, cannot survive without the workers, but the proletariat will always survive without the bourgeoisie, because it is the workers at the workplace, in a factory, that produce goods that we use daily, so they can survive without without the bourgeoisie. This is what the point that we were making again, to say one of the fundamental mistakes that we did in what we call the chaotic land reform program is that we removed the workers, mainly of Malawian, Zambian origin. We removed the workers. The supporters of ZANU-PF simply moved into the farms without understanding any farming methods. Hence, were there to destroy the farms. But what was needed was that the workers that were in the farms should have been allowed to continue working. What was needed to change was management, but the production in the farm should have remained in the hands of the workers. I am Ngabuto Nicholas Mabena, General Secretary of the Zimbabwe Communist Party. Please write your comments, subscribe, and like the video. We will continue discussing the Zimbabwe Communist Party program, where we'll be looking at the beginning of workers mobilizing themselves, and of course the beginning of the nationalist movement. It is critical that if we are to complete the liberation of Zimbabwe, we must understand where we come from. Otherwise, amandla comrades, goodbye.